background. David Greenwood joins me to talk for a few minutes about this before I talk with you, head of the Child Abuse Department at Switalski's Solicitors, who represent victims of sexual grooming gangs in some cases. Good afternoon to you, David Greenwood.
Good afternoon.
What do you make of Rishi Sunak's announcement and the conversation it's prompting?
Well, I hope this is only the start of things to come, because the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse published its final report in October last year and came up with 20 fairly heavy-duty recommendations, including amendments to the legal system to enable claimants or people abused to get some kind of recompense properly. And other new bodies set up to monitor how local authorities, police and other organisations handle their safeguarding responsibilities. So I hope this is only one in a series of announcements that he's going to make. I'm dismayed that he's turned it into a kind of a racist-friendly kind of announcement by emphasising race. As you quite rightly say, this is not something that is defined by race. It's defined by people wanting to take advantage of vulnerable children. So we mustn't lose sight of that.
Why do you think he has?
Well, it's to get votes in the run-up to the next election, isn't it?
How so?
Well, he and his Home Secretary have been pushing the immigration issue just recently, and to boil this issue of child sexual abuse down to race in a massive announcement that he's doing today is wrong. He needs to, frankly, listen to you, Sheila. You seem to have had a balanced approach to it in your introduction this morning. It affects all individuals, all parts of society. It happens mostly in families. Mm-hmm. We need to recognise that. It happens in institutions, the church, in teaching organisations, anywhere where adults have responsibility over vulnerable children.
Or access to.
Yeah.
Mm. The race thing is interesting, isn't it? Because it's good to I think it's good to know the nature of what you're dealing with, whatever it is. You know what I mean? And you'll have seen this as a lawyer over the years. You know that it's good to know Let's look at Jimmy Savile. I mean, the worst perpetrator we can imagine, and in a sense, there are so many lessons in the Savile case, aren't there? Not least on reporting and speaking up when you know or fear abuse is taking place, because so many people just opened the door for him to abuse, didn't they?
Absolutely. Jimmy Savile in many ways did society a lot of favours. What woke us up to what was happening and how we mustn't allow people to abuse, in plain sight. And the mandatory reporting issue is a great example of something good that can come of something so tragic.
And it will be interesting to hear. I know that teachers today have a lot else to talk about too, and safeguarding, we have come a long way on safeguarding, but we've still got a long way to go as well, without a doubt, whether that's in schools, in churches, wherever, and as individuals understanding it as well. But the individual school safeguarding plans, are they centrally laid down, or can schools design their own? And what are the legal ramifications therein? If a teacher, for example, didn't report something he or she suspected, would there be any consequences within the school? Do you know anything about that kind of world? Because I don't.
Yeah, schools have massively improved over the last 5 or 10 years. Most now have plans or safeguarding plans. It's a minority that don't. It's one of the massive tick boxes when they are inspected that they can fail on. Like any organisation, though, Sheila, the problem is that with teaching, until we have proper mandatory reporting, there will still be a tendency for individuals who have, personal relationships or, relationships of line manager to another person, for them to favour them and for them to discount reports against them.
And we've seen time and again how institutions, whether it's churches, NHS hospitals, schools, the institution suddenly, becomes all, doesn't it? And protecting the institution against these things.
Protecting reputations, yes. Yeah, that's a big thing.
That's a massive part of it as well.
So can I just mention that we need to be careful when we're talking about mandatory reporting also. We don't know what the government is planning.
No.
The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse came up with a recommendation, which in my opinion is too weak. It only required mandatory reporting and only laid out a penalty if a person with responsibility for caring for children had either witnessed it happening, admit to it. Now that's not mandatory reporting in my eyes.
That's interesting, isn't it? My sense of that is that that's to stop people just saying, well, him, I think, because I don't like him, always vexatious allegations.
Yeah, but people in positions of responsibility, such as teachers, healthcare workers, are not likely to make that type of vexatious complaint. We need to empower and change the entire culture of childcare to enable people to say, look, I think something's happening there. Maybe he or she is being sexually abused at home. We need to check this out and report it in.
Or a connection I see between this child and that adult gives me a heebie-jeebie that I think needs looking at, or what,
Exactly.
Yeah. And the voices we haven't heard much talked about today is the victims themselves. I mean, there was a fleeting reference from Rishi Sunak to those teenage girls not being listened to in the various grooming gang stories that we've alluded to in the past. But that's still a problem, isn't it? Children not being listened to.
Yes, definitely. And social workers right now, although obviously most social workers are really excellent, but social workers don't have a statutory, a legal obligation to report these things. And so it means that they can decide for themselves not to report these things, and children are missed and fall prey to abusers.
I have to go because of time, but just really quick, do you need to be, because they have to decide what this law will look like, this mandating law. Should you need to have a position of responsibility to be required to do it in law? Don't we all have a responsibility to children?
Yeah, that's my starting point. We all have a responsibility to look out for our children, our neighbours' children, our friends' children, and report things that we're not happy with, and many people do so. But I think to take it a step further and introduce it to the whole population would...
Too much. I think we've lost David's line, but thank you, David, for talking to me today. David Greenwood, Head of Child Abuse Department at Switalski's Solicitors. It's 1:22. Your